razzle dazzle, we're the best. No, the courts aren't on your side, but they're not on the tenant side either.
Jen,
Like, you are independently wealthy when you are naked.
I am over treating property management the same as real estate sales.
I guess I'll lead the witness. I think it's freaking scammy. Welcome to Hold It with PM Jen, the show for real estate investors who buy and hold forever and ever. Amen. Welcome to Hold It with PM Jen, the show for real estate investors who buy and hold forever and ever. Amen. All right, folks, we're going to get started with our first segment, Hold the Phone. We always start with that one. That is our guest interview. And our guest today, well, she is someone who knows real estate inside and out, from the legal fine print to the big financial strategies that can make or break a deal. I am thrilled to welcome Mallory Meehan. At Penn State University, she's known as Prof M, where she is an associate clinical professor of real estate and the associate director of the Institute for Real Estate Studies. That's a lot of words. Hopefully it's a lot of money. She's also the owner of Inspire Wealth Management and Education, where she helps real estate investors make smart moves through creative financing and innovative strategies. I'm not done. This girl, she is a licensed attorney, realtor, appraiser, and believe it or not, she somehow has an MBA, JD, and a family on top of years of hands-on industry experience. We are about to get a real crash course from one of the best, so grab a notebook and join me in welcoming Prof M.
Thank you, Jen.
Awesome. We only met a year or so ago, but we should have met back in 2010.
We should have.
And I blame Penn State University. See, Prof M and I were in the same program at the same time. We were both in the MBA program at Penn State, Maine, but Mallory was an overachiever and did the JD MBA program. So technically, I wasn't in classes with her at the exact same time, but I say we should have been introduced because we're the same person with the same interests, right?
Literally the same person.
And I know that the career services there struggled with me. Did they struggle with you?
They did.
Okay.
They did.
Why didn't they go, hey, there's somebody else over here who's giving us like problems and not a normal person who just wants to get a supply chain job at M&M Mars? Like, I really, and so it's frustrating. I had to kind of find you on my own. And so I'm really glad. Why are you obsessed with real estate?
Why am I obsessed with real estate? Well, real estate really started when I was younger. My grandfather had rental properties, and so I got to see him kind of building up some wealth. He was very, very strategic with his money, and I always emulated what he was doing. Okay. And so when he passed, my mom took over his real estate. And so with that, she leaned in on me quite heavily. And so I started learning real estate, property management at a very young age and really kind of diving in. And then when I went on to Penn State, I took a real estate course. It was the only real estate course I could take in the business college. Right. And it was taught by a realtor. Nothing wrong with that. And it got me really interested. And so when I decided to go to law school, I really focused a lot on the property law. And I found that to be fascinating and interesting. Yeah. Really liked the contract part of it. And I liked the blend of business and legal. Right. And then, later on, I found myself just really loving tax. And that sounds so far from like what people are like, you love tax. No, I love learning how not to pay tax. Let's get that straight. And of course, legally. Yeah. And so, that's kind of my real estate journey. And here we are.
How old were you when you first started doing property management tasks for the family? I'm just curious.
Probably 19 or 20.
Wow. Mm-hmm. So you get started in it, you pretty young, decide this is the career, you get that, you pass the bar, right? Yeah. You get your sales license, you become a personal investor, you're a college professor, you teach in your personal school. So you've taken on a lot of roles in real estate. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I wonder, what makes you just cast that wide of a net versus niching down? Like, what's your thought behind that?
So I think as an attorney, we're all technically generalist, right? We don't necessarily have to be a specialist like doctors, right? So it's not like you're going to be a heart surgeon. No, you're an attorney. You can practice anything. And I think for me, like actually focusing in on real estate specifically was my niche within the full legal spectrum.
So you feel like you've niched down,
I mean,
truly.
I kind of do, and I've niched down, I've continued to niche down and finding those topics and areas that I really enjoy. I mean, real estate is such a huge, vast, like open market kind of thing, but I love dealing with tax and helping people strategize how they're not going to need to pay tax. I love the creative financing opportunities. And honestly, I love just teaching and educating people on all of the things that we should learn in high school, but we are not taught.
Yeah.
So
housing's a basic need.
Absolutely.
We get taught how to handle our basic needs through education. With so many resources and strategies out there, it's hard for the new investor to know what to do first.
Oh, absolutely.
And you've got the Inspire Wealth Education, school out there, and maybe you've already done this, but if you could make one day of education mandatory for the aspiring investor, what topics are you prioritizing in that 8-hour course?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really great question. And I think one of the first things is people need to understand just basic personal finance. And so really helping them understand how debt works, how a credit score works, understanding how a mortgage is going to really affect them. And so that would basically be the beginning part. And then I always like to teach people, buying a property is not always the best decision based on the market that you're in. And so you really need to analyze where you plan on either living or you plan on investing. And doing a rent buy comparison model is something I think everybody should know because these young people coming out of high school or college or even moving to a new space, they don't necessarily know the market and maybe jump right in and buy something where it would have been more advantageous for them just to continue renting.
Yeah, that is such a good point. And the New York Times has a great buy versus sell calculator. You put in a lot of data. It's not quick. You have to put in a lot of data. And I've found that generally speaking, 5 years, that if you're not going to be in that asset for at least 5 years, you're better off renting financially, just by the numbers, all things totaled. And what that means for millennials, I think, and you're a millennial as well. Yeah. I mean, that's all that counts, right? Because that's what we are. We had this idea from our Gen X and Boomer parents. If you're going to own property, you're going to own your house first. And if you don't own your house, you're losing, right? So you got to own your house. And once you own your house, then you can play with some more real estate. Yeah. And that's great as long as you're going to be in that house more than 5 years. Exactly. And my mom and dad they paid off mortgages in houses they lived in the whole time. That's not happening in my world.
No.
So we are talking, we have a little visitor here in the studio today. We have Malia, Mal's daughter, and we'll welcome her to join us. She's watching her video. I like to talk to people about how it's important to not prioritize your own home first. And I think millennials are choosing to maybe rent housing and then invest in other places. Because that you can get over that transition cost threshold where you're holding it for a long enough time.
Well, and I think with our generation too, we want to have more flexibility. We want to have the opportunity to be able to move and not be tied down to something. And markets are so vastly different. And so it's so important to understand exactly what's happening in your specific market. And if you're moving to a larger city, it's more advantageous for you to rent. But find a place, find a pocket in central Pennsylvania that you can find a good deal, making cash flow, and then using that as your business write-offs. And, it definitely has to be what fits for where you're at in your particular life too.
Is real estate investment just so much harder than you thought? I know it seems unfair, but, and I say this with love, that's what the money's for.
taking the risk and figuring out the problems. And if you do it well, you are handsomely rewarded. Lucky for you, I've got 2 new events lined up that will change the game for you. First up, deal tours. Imagine spending an entire day with me, walking through multifamily properties available for sale, off market of course, breaking down the numbers and figuring out how to stabilize and add value like a pro. I am making that dream a reality, and whether you're actively buying or just sharpening your skills, this is where real investors learn to win. First one is in spring 2025. And this fall, the Buy Better, Hold Better Summit. One day, top tier education, industry experts with experience in the North Central PA market who actually know what they're talking about, and the connections you need to make your investment success possible. Think of it as a masterclass in buy and hold real estate. Additionally, the room is full of people doing the same thing as you, so you can build that network with little effort. Don't forget, for the 4th year in a row, we are hosting our Williamsport area real estate investor meetups every other month in Linden. Want the inside track? Of course you do. Go to holditwithpmgen.com and register for event updates. And while you're at it, follow me, Hold It with PM Gen, on Facebook, TikTok, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Helping real people grow real wealth with real estate.
Totally. Our next segment, Hold the Presses, where we react to market news. And this isn't news. You know, we're at the end of October as we record this, but this summer, this spring, there was a lot going on with the antitrust settlements, with National Association of Realtors and various MLSs, and changes in buyer compensation. And our listeners don't want to hear the details of how this worked out, because I got to tell you, it is so freaking hard to understand. And truly, the news is so bleak for our friends in NAR. I want to know what you think real estate investors are going to notice. If we could fast forward 5 years, all this stuff is flushed out, we have the changes to the industry, what's it going to look like? What's the role of the real estate sales professional in the real estate investor's life in 5 years? How does that look different? And what do we need to know and understand as consumers of those services?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest differences is going to be that those who are buying property are going to most likely be seeing that commission hit their closing side.
Right.
Now, the tradition was always you pay 6% commission, and that covered both the buyer and the seller's agents.
Yeah.
And now with the settlement, you know, it's kind of cleared things up. And it's basically saying, well, you shouldn't, as the seller, be obligated to pay the buyer's agent when it was the buyer's choice to have that agent represent them. If they choose to have an agent, they should pay for them. Right. But we got into a lot of, you know, problems because the banks wouldn't finance that within a mortgage. And so people had to come out of pocket for that.
Right.
And so that's why it traditionally fell on the sellers, because they were the ones who were getting the money out. So I think as buyers of real estate, if you do plan on having an agent, you're going to have to start working those costs of the commission into your total closing cost estimation.
Yeah. I think in 5 years, the expectation of our sales professionals will just be so different. Because if buyers are expected to come to the closing table with a check to compensate the sales professional that helped them, then the value proposition needs to be a bit more apparent.
No, absolutely. And I think that a lot of people look at realtors and they're like, you stick a sign out, you maybe walk some people through my house, and this is how much money you're making. Now, there are realtors out there that do a fantastic job. You know, they put together great videos, great photos, do a great job marketing, but it's not all of them.
Nope.
And so for them to get paid a significant chunk of money, you know, people are going to want to expect to see that value add.
Without creating value.
Correct.
And I think that's all. I think the consumers are kind of putting a critical eye onto what value is being created here, and so are the real estate professionals. And I guess DOJ also decided to have a say in it too.
They always do. They always like to have a say.
Well, our next segment, hold on to your day job. See, we don't often get people on this show with day jobs because we're real estate investors, and famously that means you don't work, obviously. Right? Just kidding. It's a lot of work. Tell me about your role at Penn State. You know, college education and college degrees in real estate, most people I work with, I'm incredibly overeducated having an MBA in this industry.
Absolutely.
So tell me about your role at Penn State, what's the function and role of the real estate department? What kind of education are the students getting? What kind of careers are they interested in? Tell me what happens at a real estate department at Penn State.
So our real estate department really started to grow over the past 10 years. Now, Penn State, like a lot of other colleges, did have real estate programs, but during the financial crisis, a lot of them went under because people just did not want to get into real estate. They were terrified as to what was happening. And so right now, I joined in 2017 and I joined in 2017 and my first major, so we had a major, but it was technically called a risk management major, which confused a bunch of people. I was confused. I didn't know what it really meant.
Took all the sexiness out of real estate.
Took all the sexiness out completely. And so my first year teaching our majors, I had nine students.
That's it.
9. Yes. So we knew that we needed to do some work at, again, just educating people on what real estate means.
Right.
Because a lot of people have this misconception that we're teaching people how to be agents, which we're not. Right. We are not teaching you how to be an agent. I'm teaching you how to think, act, and dive into being an investor.
Right.
And that means no matter what company you're working for, you're thinking with the hat of an investor. And so these students are going into careers as analysts. They're going into careers as commercial appraisers, brokers, financial institutions where they're mortgage lenders. I mean, all sorts of different things. I mean, these students are the quintessential real estate professionals that we have outside of traditional real estate investors.
Okay. Yeah. So they're working for very large institutions then.
Most of them, yes.
Okay.
Most of them.
And that makes sense. You have to get a job and make money when you're a young person. Do these students have aspirations to replace that active income with all passive then? They see the wisdom in it.
Yes. They're like, I want to work for 5 to 7 years, save up enough money and start investing. And I keep telling them the first way to invest is house hacking. Yeah. Like I tell them all the time, do it while you're in college. Why not? Find a duplex. There was actually just a duplex that came up for sale at downtown State College, which does not happen very often.
No.
And we were running numbers and we were saying, okay, you live in this one side, you have a roommate and you rent out the other side. Can you cover your costs?
Right.
And
could they?
Oh, absolutely.
Wonderful.
They get an FHA loan, 3.5% down, live in it for a year. Then you can convert it to a conventional, hopefully when rates come back down.
Yep.
You now use that as your collateral or your equity, and then go ahead and do it wherever you're going to be working.
Oh, and are you having any students actually execute on this at this point?
Surprisingly, yes.
Yes. No, it's not surprising at all. It really is. It's probably surprising because it's probably hard at their age and in the last couple of years to amass any sum of money.
Listen, these kids, they have Bitcoin and they have probably really good gambling pockets where they're, sports betting and whatnot. But
really,
I was shocked when some of my students told me they had $30,000+ just saved away. But then again, they're not paying for school.
Okay. Right.
So there's a difference.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So what do you think the biggest advantage, because Gen Z is who you're teaching now.
I am, yes.
What's their advantage in the real estate industry?
Their advantage is that they didn't live through the financial crisis that we lived through. And so they are not as timid. They don't have those battle scars yet. And so they have a more I can do it because I haven't seen it not work.
Right.
Now, obviously they lived through COVID and they saw what COVID brought. But, all in all, they don't have that, reminder that, shit hit the fan in 2007, 2008.
Wow.
And real estate completely lost its value.
Yeah, because how old were they then? Were they just little kids?
Little. I mean, the fact that none of them were alive during 9/11, just every year they keep getting younger and I keep getting older. And
No, we can't talk about that. You know, I used to give talks about millennials and how millennials will invest in real estate differently. And I did this when millennials were still in college and still quite young. And my hypothesis was they're going to be much more aggressive with real estate later in life, but they're going to be very gun shy in the beginning because, well, for me anyway, just use my elder millennial example. I go to college.com bust, right?
Yep.
Enron, right? All of that crisis, housing crisis, the wars. I mean, elder millennials are timid when it comes to risk. And I hypothesized that they were going to struggle to get started economically. So they were going to struggle to get on the property ladder.
Yep.
And then that they were going to realize at about the time I'm at, mid 40s, retirement's coming. And there is no better way to fast track wealth growth than real estate. And that is what my hypothesis was, and that we would be the first generation to own real estate consistently that we didn't live in.
Yeah.
That we might rent our personal home and we would own other assets. And that is the case in my portfolio. We have tenant applicants who own real estate. I have clients who are also tenants in other clients' properties. What? And you go, why does that make sense?
Yeah.
It does for them.
I think the other thing, you know, with COVID showing that we can really do things remote, people don't feel the need that they have to be locked down to one specific location.
Right.
Why not have the flexibility that maybe you rent someplace for 6 months, you rent another place for 6 months, but you still have passive income coming in from an investment in, you know, a solid market.
Right.
You've heard it 1,000 times. Your network is your net worth. But what are you actually doing about it? See, the most successful people I know dedicate time and money to growing and strengthening their networks. And I don't mean by joining Facebook groups and posting that you're looking for deals. Here's a tip: that doesn't work. You have to be in person with people who share your interests and be willing to help each other. At the Williamsport Area Real Estate Investors Meetup, the largest in the region, we do just that. We're focused on making sure you meet people that help you achieve your goals. This isn't one of those events where speakers pitch you their overpriced courses or books. Nope. We bring in legit experts to drop actual value, and it's totally free. For now, but don't hold me to that forever, because this is too good and the room only holds so many. Get the dates, times, and speaker lineup at holditwithpmgen.com. That's holditwithpmgen.com, and I will see you there.
And millennials cannot give up economic opportunities.
No.
Just because you own your house on a 2% mortgage here in central Pennsylvania, right? You get that great opportunity in Nashville. And you go, I can't leave. I can't sell this house. I hear it all the time. And I'm like, whoa, do not let that deed stop you from what could be a pivot point in your career and life if you want to take that.
But I think to your point, a lot of people assume that if they are moving, they have to sell. And so I was actually just talking to a friend of mine who's doing that. And I was like, oh, I wish you would have talked to me before you sold, because you could have just done a cash out refi, kept the property as a rental, taken out that equity tax free, put that into your new home. And now you have two investments. And I mean, 2% loans, yes, they're never going to happen likely again. But if you can still have two assets versus only having one, the 2% is going to be null and void.
It really is. It's a novel thing that will be flushed out here in no time. Well, our next segment, hold up, let me get this straight, where we debunk myths and misconceptions. There is so much easy money talk around investing, because I consume I'm creating content, I'm consuming content. And the thing I always say, politely is like, that doesn't seem to share my values. I guess I'll lead the witness. I think it's fucking scammy. What do you think about the easy money talk in investment and what it does to regular people who are interested?
No, absolutely. I mean, real estate is a great investment opportunity, but you have to be very conservative with your numbers. And these people that are talking about easy money, they've been through it. And now they're on the other side, and they're only telling you the things that are on that other side. I mean, because I'm going through it right now. I had to evict a tenant. The tenant trashed the house. They turned off all the utilities. I had to pay somebody to take out 45 yards of trash.
Wow.
45 yards of trash.
That's 22 dumpsters that are sitting outside my office.
Yes. That's it. It was a lot of trash. So had to pay somebody for that. I've been paying their mortgage, because they are not paying rent. And now I have to get it ready and decide, okay, do I keep it as a rental or do I just sell it and cut my losses? And honestly, I'm at the point where I'm like, I just want to cut my losses.
I see.
It's in a place that is farther away from me. I had been managing it personally. I didn't have a property manager. And, the horror stories are true. And, we have to take the good with the bad.
There
and
you
it's
go.
like the good, bad, the ugly with real estate. You just have to be prepared for it.
Yeah. I mean, I can't, as a person who sells buy and hold property management, talk only about horror stories, but that is a frustration I have. Like, you can't show me your best deal. By the way, you want to see my best deal? You'll think I'm a freaking genius if you see my best 2 deals, okay? But the truth is there's a spectrum of deals.
Yeah.
Like you got some crappy ones on the end, but
Yeah.
most of them fall in the middle.
Yeah.
Most fall in the middle, and I would love to represent a more realistic approach of, and like, Mallory's not freaking out about her bad tenant and her bad move out. It is numbers. It is business. She has decisions to make. And oftentimes I find that too. I find that people sensationalize the bad with the emotions that can come up in it. And it's like, no,
Yes.
let it go.
Well, you have a great point when it comes to emotions. And this is something that I would very much caution people is that when you're dealing with real estate, you have to take all of the emotions out of it, because a lot of people, if it was their primary residence at one point, if it was their parents' home, if it had any sort of emotional connection to them, they hold on to those emotions far more than they look at what it is on paper.
Oh, they absolutely do.
So that's definitely a word for the wise. It's a house or it's a building. You got to just take it as that.
Right. And stop trying to make every house you live in a house for you at some point, because then the emotions are tied to that and the feelings are tied. It is the very rare creature that can turn a home into an investment.
Yeah.
It like in their portfolio. I really a lot of times avoid working with accidental landlords because sometimes they are a management challenge because of the emotions.
Yeah.
We've all heard, and I've told people real estate's a safe investment, which is a very short sentence that has a lot of asterisks behind it. Given your experience, what are the risks, maybe besides being too aggressive with the numbers, that you think investors are overlooking?
Well, I mean, tenants in and of themselves are a big risk, right? We always want to make sure that we're screening tenants properly, that we're knowing exactly what we're getting into. It's also the hidden problems. If you're going to buy an older home, you're going to have to expect that something's going to likely come up. I mean, where I am in State College, it's mostly older homes.
Yeah.
My home and one of my other rentals was built in 1928.
There you go.
Good bones, but you're probably going to need to update the electrical, the plumbing. You're going to have to do a lot of repairs and maintenance versus if you're buying a brand new property, there may be less upkeep to get into. So I think that, really understanding the property, understanding the tenants, but then also understanding what's happening in the market. And so you might have local political issues coming up that could potentially affect you as a real estate investor. So in State College, for example, they recently enacted a short-term rental policy. And so people had been renting their properties short-term rental for football weekends. Why wouldn't you, right? Very big moneymaker, easy to do. People were doing this to cover their mortgage. They were doing this intermittently while they didn't have tenants. Well, when they enacted this policy, now all of those that were purely investments no longer are applicable to be short-term rentals.
You can only do it with the house you're currently living in.
You can only do it with a house that you claim as your primary residence, or if you have a full-time tenant, they are permitted to rent your house out short term.
So getting back to the original philosophy of Airbnb, that this is spare rooms, futons in spare rooms.
Yeah, the couch surfing,
Okay, so you want them to be looking at tenant risk, getting more information about the market, knowing about old properties. I'm going to hit you with the whopper. How do they do it? How do they, right, so I'm Jen. I'm a dental hygienist. I'm so great with my money. I've got $50,000. I love Hold It with PM Jen. I'm their biggest fan, right? And I'm watching this and I'm going, great. I took the note, Mal. Like, I need to know the market. I need to know how to deal with tenants and screen them and things like that. Like, how do they do that?
That's a great question.
Yeah. Inspire wealth, education, and consulting.
I definitely,
do you do stuff like that?
do stuff like that. So what I call it my superpower, I'm a great connector. So understanding somebody's situation, understanding what their risk tolerance is, understanding kind of what involvement they want to be. Do they want to be purely passive? Do they want to be somewhat passive, but maybe a little bit active? Or do they plan on wanting to get their feet wet and really dive in and being an active investor? And it's really important to understand, what they feel is going to be their commitment level. And once they know that, kind of bringing in those other compliments makes it a lot easier. So it really, again, comes down to the individual, what their risk tolerance is, and their timelines too, honestly.
Like, that sounds a lot like the consulting that you do, right? It sounds then like for that new investor who wants to do it carefully, wants to look before they leap, they might engage a consultant like you and go, okay, here I am. I'm Jen. Here's my situation. Like, let's work it out. Like, help me overcome my challenges. That's a really good point. And I guess, how does one find that sort of thing? Because most real estate education is scammy, skeezy. We all have been suckered into the free ticket to the ballroom at the Holiday Inn from the people who are making gazillions of dollars in real estate, but for some reason are at the Holiday Inn in Williamsport on a Saturday, right? I get those mailers. I actually haven't gone to the ballroom, but I go like, but if you truly are doing all of this and you're on like HGTV, I don't see the draw, like, for the free thing. And I get it. You're going to sell me the $10,000 whatever that you're not really a part of, but how much money are you really making in real estate? And how do I check that? So if I'm telling people right now, you're legit. You're legit. You're not a scam artist. And there's so much about your credibility and things that would go to say that. But what if I'm not in state college? How do I find that?
Yeah. Well, and I do remote consulting too. So, and I think
that's a good idea.
You can find people out there that are reliable. There are attorneys out there that also will focus on, okay, here's maybe like if you're doing estate planning and you're really looking to see like what's going on and how you want to, basically carry out the rest of your life, carry out your retirement. Having a strong team of an accountant and an attorney in your corner is definitely something that's also very helpful. The problem with financial advisors, which a lot of people are like, oh, I have a financial advisor. I don't need any help on that piece. Financial advisors get paid from the money that they get when you're investing into stocks, mutual funds, and bonds. Real estate is not something they get paid on. So guess what? They aren't going to help you out anything related to real estate. They won't.
And I've tried to make connections with financial advisors before, and they don't know what to do with me.
No.
And they don't understand that I want to talk about self-directed IRAs. They don't understand what I want to talk about, that being a valuable part of a strategy that includes what they can do. But as I always say, like financial planners, those guys, whatever they can do from the clicks of their keyboard and the clicks of a mouse. And I'm not doing that. I'm out in these streets, doing those things. Well,
you know what's better than building generational wealth? Not a damn thing. And obviously the best way to do that is through buy and hold real estate. But let's be real, managing your properties yourself, that's a one-way ticket to burnout. This is supposed to be an investment, not a burden. At One Focus Property Management, we don't just manage your properties, we make buy and hold real estate actually work. We handle everything: tenant screening, maintenance, rent collection, you name it. All you do is watch your portfolio and net worth grow. We make sure you never even think about quitting real estate investing, because the secret to buy and hold is to hold it for a very long time. And you can't do that when you sell every time you have a problem. We're the biggest, baddest property management team in Lycoming, Clinton, Northumberland, Montour, and Columbia counties. And we do it all to give you more protection, less work, and absolutely no drama. So let's turn your rental properties into wealth-building machines. Learn more at onefocuspm.com. That's onefocuspm.com.
there's a myth that real estate investing, you just got to have a ton of money before you can start. And how accessible do you think real estate investment really is, here in our market? And are there creative ways to get started if you don't have that big pile of cash?
100%.
Okay.
And I mean, that's exactly how I bought two of my most recent properties. Is I bought them through creative financing methods. One of them I did a lease option. And so basically I created the lease like any other person would rent a space, but I locked in a sale price within 3 years from that owner. And so by doing that, I was able to tie down this property, not having to worry about inflation, not having to worry about marketary changes. And then I found somebody else who wanted to rent to own. And so I didn't have to put any money out of my own pocket because I created a lease agreement. And then, so I didn't have to go to a closing or anything. I create this 3-year lease agreement. And then I go out and I find somebody who doesn't have the credit score that they need to get approved by a bank. Most of the time I'm looking at entrepreneurs because I know that they have funds. A bank just isn't going to look at them until they have 2 to 3 years of, verification. So I found a family who has a welding business, very, very profitable business. And they are renting from me until they can finally get approved for a traditional loan, at which time they'll close at the same time I close, and voila, I get my money out of this property, whereas I didn't have to put anything down.
That's really creative.
I know.
You have a much higher risk tolerance than me. And every time you tell me one of these stories, I mean, it blows my hair back that you're like, no big deal, no big whoop. I just do this, and then I do this, and I do this. And I'm just like, it's genius. It's genius. How often, like in 3 years, does it go the way you expected?
Well, so the one that I have is the eviction. And so that was a
rent to
different one.
own?
It was a rent to own. They put a deposit down. So I did have a deposit, but most of that deposit went to cover the closing costs because I did buy that one, but I bought it subject to. And so I bought it subject to an existing loan. It was actually a VA loan, which has no due on sale questions, which most people ask, like, how can you buy something that somebody else has a mortgage on? Doesn't the bank call it due? Certain loans do not have that restriction, and VA loans are one of them, just because vets are veterans.
And they can get sold to a non-vet.
Yep. Wow. So I pay that mortgage on behalf of that former owner. I have the deed to the property, and, I can do with it what I want.
It sounds like you don't just do creative financing. You do it like to the power of 3. You're like, I'm not going to use one strategy when I can use 5. And that is really, really genius. Our next segment, our final one, my favorite, we never miss it. Hold my drink. Stories that, are amusing and we have a little fun. So I'm interested because I get asked all kinds of places for real estate advice. Probably the worst is when you're naked. And
what?
well, when you're getting like a personal service that involves you not being dressed, a waxing, a sunless tan, something with a doctor. And they're like, and then what do you do about squatters? And you're like, well, I'm going to put my pants on. That's what I'm going to do today. So any weird, unexpected places you've been asked to consult on real estate?
Actually, I was getting a facial the other day, and like you said, I had a towel on, and so that's where I gave my most recent real estate advice, was in the process of getting a facial underneath one of like these, facial mask things. Yeah.
I had once, I have a new rule because of this incident. I don't tell people what I do for a living when I'm not dressed. And it was it was a spray tan, and the gal's doing it, and she's crouched down and, in areas, and she goes, what do you do for a living? And I just wasn't even thinking, I'm the broker owner of this company. And she had just done a phone interview for a leasing agent job like a week ago, and it wasn't a great interview. And the realization, she's cheerful about the realization, right? And I was like, Jen, Like, you are independently wealthy when you are naked. Like, we don't talk about work.
And it's so funny because the first thing I thought of was that your husband was asking us, and it's not even him.
No, he's not interested in real estate.
He doesn't care.
He's not interested. So you've probably seen, as a realtor and an attorney, some odd contract clauses. Any weird ones that stick out that you'd share?
Yeah. So I think this is probably because I live in a college town, but in a lot of our lease agreements, you cannot have slip and slides, kegs, inflatable pools, water beds, which tends to be a common one in a lot of leases, but to specifically call out like the kegs and the slip and slides. There was also one that, it's basically, if it's been done, it's now incorporated into the lease. And so this lease has now just been, aggregated over time, and everything that kids can try to do, whatever. There's like one that you have to now have a fence around the perimeter if you're in a fraternity house and you plan on having a party.
Makes sense. So controlling access.
Controlling it. Yep. So, I think again, it all kind of varies and depends on the market that you're in and like the type of tenants that you're typically renting to. With college students, obviously they all have parental guarantees where the parents are going to be responsible. And I think fraternity houses are very interesting and they're very unique. And the things that go into those leases are things that you got to be like, huh.
Yeah, what happened here that made this get typed into a document? Right. My favorite that I found, there's the world's oldest business. I don't know. It's the oldest business in Williamsport, Plankenhorns. It was a stationery store and a printer. Okay. And until like 4 years ago or whatever, when my friend bought the business, they sold forms for like $8. You could get a lease, and it was one page, front and back, and it's horrid.
Oh my God. It was $8 for a lease? Well,
it was the craziest thing you've ever seen. It had to have been written like pre-1960. And in the lease, it said that if you owe rent, you are prohibited from taking any of your personal belongings out of the property because the landlord has a lien on all of your stuff and can come and just start taking your toaster oven for the rent.
Gosh.
And, and the guy I'm working with is like kind of proud of it. He thinks this is genius. And I'm like, it's the 2020s, friend. We're not like bartering the personal belongings, and
that's
not
totally
even unenforceable.
Like, that's so not even legal.
You're going to get arrested for stealing, for like burglarizing your own tenant.
Well, and I think that's another important point that you bring up is that we have to understand that self-help is not something that you can just go ahead and do if people don't pay their rent. So you can't go and change their locks. You can't go and like take all their stuff and put it out on the lawn and think, okay, now they're going to pay me.
And I'll tell you, I didn't think the police cared about that, but there was an incident in my town and the police did react and there were charges brought and the charges were dropped. But I was like, oh, police and the DA is taking self-help seriously? That's interesting to me.
Yeah.
Any you just can't make this stuff up kind of moments from your experience?
I've seen, especially also if you're going to have pets, there have been exclusionary pets. And the fact that you have to write, tarantulas or bearded dragons or piranhas in a lease really just begs the question as to who was actually in your place.
Yeah.
Did they have a pet store or were they just that strange?
It's so weird you bring that up. Like a month ago, you brought up bearded dragons and pet store. Apparently, one of our tenants really is into bearded dragons and feeding them. And they eat cockroaches.
Sure.
And he's breeding cockroaches in 60 of those like giant Rubbermaid totes on wooden racks in his apartment. Yeah. Some of them don't have lids. And he said, it's okay. They don't fly that good. Yeah, we found that. Honestly, though, really clean and neat. I'm not here saying it's okay. It's not permitted by One Focus. In this particular case, it's permitted by the property owner. And yeah, he's selling cockroaches. I think it's cockroaches to feed bearded dragons because we were like, what's going on in here?
Right.
What's going on? The pictures were just so creepy crawly of like looking into the tote and then the racks and racks. And he said, I think he said he has like 350,000 cockroaches right now, which is like a pretty light time for him in terms of inventory.
Well, I think that also brings up a great point. If you are going to be a landlord, you need to really define that notice requirement and what are you permitted to come in to do. And so I am a fan of having, not necessarily too frequent inspections, but at least having the ability to come in once a month, once a quarter, to just do an inspection on what's happening with the property. That way, if your tenants aren't telling you something or there's some sort of a issue, it's not going to go too far to the point that now it's going to cost you a boatload of money compared to it could have been remedied.
Right. Nothing replaces walking your doors. Nothing replaces the experience of just being in the physical space together. Not only are you monitoring and able to correct, but you're signal sending that you give a shit.
Yeah.
That you care.
Right.
And that changes behavior. So much. It's why we have a full-time property inspector at One Focus.
I was going to say, that's why I give you mad props. And that's why I tell everybody, I'm like, you need to find a good property manager if you're not going to be in the area or you're not wanting to be that active. And Jen, you guys do a fantastic job. I tell everybody who's looking for property in this neck of the woods to go talk to my girl.
We're right for the right people. Yeah. And that's really, it gives me a lot of satisfaction. Thank you so much for joining us today. There's going to be a lot of people who want to learn more about Inspire Wealth Consulting and Education. And how do they contact you, reach those resources? Yeah, so I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, LinkedIn, but then also my website, inspirewealthmgt.com. Okay. And I would love to, I offer free 15-minute consultations just so that people can kind of understand exactly what I would do as far as a consultant and, what that might look like for them. So, yeah. Invaluable. Please, please, please look up Mallory and her Inspire Wealth Education and Consulting. And I'll remind you that Wilson Phillips has told us best, and we are to just hold on for one more day. Don't ever sell. And we'll see you next time.